Hey there, I'm Grace.
And I'm Amelia.
And welcome to the Women Invest in Real Estate podcast, where we talk about getting started in real estate, scaling, and we give you the inside scoop about our day-to-days as full-time investors. We are so excited to host 2 free 60-minute trainings on how to get started in real estate investing with a full-time job. You can attend on either Monday, September 26th at 7 p.m. Central or Thursday, September 29th at 1 p.m. Central. In this training, we will cover the 6 different types of real estate investing so that you can figure out which one is the right fit for you, the 4 biggest mistakes new real estate investors make, the 3 most important factors when analyzing any real estate deal, and 3 ways to rent your property. Head to womeninvestinrealestate.com/training to sign up, and we'll see you then.
Welcome back to episode 10 of the Women Invest in Real Estate podcast. Today, we are so excited to welcome Kayla Thorp, also known as That Landlady on Instagram. And so, Kayla, would you mind giving us an introduction to yourself?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. My name's Kayla. I am a small residential real estate investor in upstate New York. Our portfolio is currently 40 stores, and we do mostly long-term rentals. We have our first, as you guys know, midterm rental, thanks partially to, watching what you guys have been doing. And then we're starting our first couple short-term rentals.
Kayla, yay. I'm so excited to talk to you. I know I've told you this before, but you are seriously one of the smartest people I feel like I know in real estate, and I've learned a ton from you. So I'm super excited to learn about your systems and processes. You do real estate with your husband. Tell us, what are some of your main systems as you moved? Because I assume you started self-managing. Am I correct? Or did you ever hire a
Yeah.
PM?
No, we started out managing all of our units ourselves.
So give us a little timeline of just how that evolved to where you are today.
So we bought our first couple of units, and I think at that point we were using cozy.co, which I know a lot of newer investors were using. I think they've since merged maybe.
They're apartments.com
something
now.
else. Yeah. Okay. So around the time when that merge happened, we just realized that it wasn't serving us well anymore. It wasn't meeting all of our needs. And then with the merge brought up some new challenges. Our tenants were having a lot of challenges with it. So we transitioned over to Buildium, which we really enjoyed and we liked using for a long time. And now that we have recently started a property management company, we have transitioned to Appfolio, which is very similar to Buildium, just a little bit different if you're not familiar with that one.
What was your thought process around starting out self-managing? What was the reason for self-managing right off the bat?
So a big part of our investment strategy, and something that I always point out to new investors, that if you buy a property and you don't factor in a management fee, you're not buying an investment, you're buying yourself a job. Because eventually, if you want this to become more passive, you will need to hire a manager. Granted, hopefully appreciation and rent growth will help you out and mostly cover that at the time. But, that time came up quicker for me than I thought it was going to. And so I was really, really glad that we had factored in that management percentage from the beginning. But in the beginning, we wanted to go full-time fairly quickly. And so being able to keep that management percentage to fund our lives while we were building our portfolio was super valuable for us until we were at the point where we were ready to kind of put some more systems in place and hire out pieces of it.
And I just want to be clear for those who are listening, Kayla and her husband do this full time, and you've only been doing it for a few years, which is super inspiring. Talk us through. So when you first hired out the PM, it was internal, correct?
When we first hired out the property management, yes, we hired somebody internally.
What did that look like? What was that thought process? How did you do that?
So something that was super integral to that process, which I know that I've had side conversations with Grace about, but I can't remember if I've ever mentioned it to you, Amelia, is our standard operating procedures document, which is this. I know it's like the most boring thing. It's ridiculously long, but it's like our hit by the bus insurance plan, right? Like if somebody else had to step in and run our business, they could pick up the SOP. It would be painful, but they could get through it. So we started that standard operating procedure very early on in our business so that when it came time to hire somebody, that transition was a little bit less painful and we could point back at all of our documented systems and documented procedures and say, this is exactly how you screen a tenant. This is exactly how you turn over a unit. These are our standards for an A-class rental. These are our standards for a B-class rental. These, et cetera. So having
That's
that in
amazing.
place, yeah. And something advice that I was given early on from one of my mentors was that generally by the time you feel ready to hire, it's too late to hire. So you're already overloaded, you're already too busy. So if you start putting in the systems and processes in place at the time that you feel ready to hire, chances are you don't have time to backtrack and create all those systems while also trying to go through the hiring process. So just to anybody starting out, I would say if you can put those systems in place as you go, you're going to thank yourself so much later on.
Definitely. I think that's one of my biggest regrets actually, when I first started was like, I just wing things, and like, I do not have standard operating procedures for a lot of the things that I do. They're just all in my brain. So I need to be better about writing those out so that I can eventually hand them off to somebody else.
Yeah, and naturally I'm the same way. Like my personality type is very like everything's just going to work out and we're going to figure it out and we're going to get through it. Which is why it's so lucky that I do this with my husband, because he comes from an IT and a military background. So he's very like regimented. We need a system for everything. And I will say, as we have started scaling, his skill set in that systems and processes has been just absolutely invaluable, because without the systems, scaling is just painful. Scaling the Kayla way is not recommended. I defer to my husband on that one.
Absolutely. I would imagine that scaling the Kayla way looks very much like scaling the Amelia way. So
probably
not really efficient, but we get the job done.
It gets done,
So you own, I think all of your properties are in New York right now, aren't they?
Yes. Yep.
So how do you deal with investing in a tenant-friendly state? Because I think that's one of the fears that a lot of like new investors have is like, well, I live in a very tenant-friendly state and that scares me.
Yeah, I would say we've developed a lot of our management style based on the state that we live in. So some of the things that I see suggested online maybe or in different forums, I just know they don't work here. So we've had to adjust our management style quite a bit here. When a tenant goes non-paying, I know landlords in a lot of other states would just serve a notice and start the eviction process and they'll have them out in 2 months. And in New York, that's just not the way it is. We have to work with tenants. We have to really make an effort to understand what's going on. And I would venture to say that this is probably helpful even if you are in a landlord friendly state, because we've developed a problem solving style that's really helped us get through most of these situations without having to go the eviction route. Because if you do have to go the eviction route in New York, it's very painful. And also our screening practices are very different now than when we first started. We can't be as lenient as you might be able to be in some of the more landlord friendly states. We can only take 1 month security deposit here. We can't take pet fees, lots of different things. We can't check eviction histories.
I didn't know you can't take pet fees. That's a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one. So, and I mean, we do still accept pets because for us, we have found that our tenants with pets tend to be high quality tenants. So, and that's, the decision that we've made, but other people have decided, no pet fees, no pets. So just tailoring our management style to the laws that we have here has been very important for us. The other piece of that is that we're very politically involved so that we can stay on top of what's coming down the pipeline, new legislations that are being proposed. My husband and I started the Rochester Housing Coalition, which is a group of housing providers and also nonprofit organizations that deal with homelessness in our city to address some of the housing policy concerns and to help the city work through those things in a way that's beneficial to everybody.
Wow, that is so cool. You really do stay on top of that. Like you definitely know your laws and know your stuff, which is so important to self-manage. But that's huge for you to just not sit on the sideline and hope that things get better for landlords and tenants, but to actually be a part and be an active voice in the change is really, really cool.
I think that you are really good at like, there's a fine line between being like a landlord and a business owner and being like a compassionate human being. And like, you have to have a good balance of both, like just morally, I think, because you have people's like literal lives in your hand when you're a landlord. So I don't think that any of us are like law haters by any means, but I mean, you just have to ride that line in the middle somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. And the biggest thing that we always come back to when we're talking to lawmakers is accountability on both sides. we don't want bad operators in the space. We also want tenants to have accountability for their behavior as well. So accountability on both sides. It should be fair.
That's good. So tell us more about when you did hire your first internal property manager. How did that go? What did that look like from day one? What did it evolve into? And what were some lessons learned? That was a lot of questions in a row.
That was so many questions. Okay. So when we first hired, the person that we hired in-house was an old friend of our business partner. So we felt really good about having a long-standing character reference for this person.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that people have different opinions about doing business with friends or friends of friends or whatever, but that's what we did. So at first we handed off piece by piece. So I think we maybe went a little bit slower with the transition than we could have. However, we know that a property manager is a very dynamic role. And the person that we hired for their skill sets and their personality and not necessarily their property management experience. So the first thing that I think we handed off was like maintenance ticket coordination. Okay. So we introduced them to our maintenance team, we introduced them to our ticketing system, went through all of that, and we handed off just that piece. And they did that for a week. We worked through the kinks with that. Then we moved on to say, the rent collection system and outstanding collections, handed over that piece. Then we might have gone on to delinquencies and evictions, et cetera, et cetera. So we handed over piece by piece until they were fully running. Jake and my goal was to get down to 10 hours total for the both of us and the in the management of our portfolio here. And we felt like once we accomplished that, we would consider the stand-up complete.
I love
10
that.
hours a month.
10 hours a week.
Okay.
I really want to dig in. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. 10 hours a week because we're still acquiring at a decent pace.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So
that's what people don't realize.
10 hours a week. Exactly. That 10 hours a week is mostly spent on acquisitions and the project management.
Yep.
Right.
Got it.
So for listeners who are maybe like wanting to start self-managing, dig into like, okay, so what did that look like for maintenance tickets? Like, what's your system for handling those maintenance tickets?
Okay. So we primarily rent to, I would say, B and C class tenants. So in a perfect world, all of our maintenance tickets would come in through our maintenance portal. We would never be dealing with any texts or phone calls from tenants. It would all just be, automated, but that's just not real life. So our maintenance tickets come in a combination of ways through mostly text message and our maintenance portal. So it was just, a lot of learning how to triage those tickets because not every maintenance ticket necessarily needs somebody to go out to the property. But if you don't have a background in property management or construction, it's sometimes hard to know what steps you can take in order to avoid always sending somebody out to the property first thing. So it was going over how to do, phone troubleshooting, what constitutes an emergency and what constitutes an inconvenience, and when to send somebody out right away, how to prioritize the tickets, and then also how to close out a ticket. So, when we're closing out a ticket, we need photos of the repair and somebody has to circle back with that tenant and make sure that the tenant is happy with the resolution for that ticket and that they consider it resolved so that it doesn't come back around and become another ticket.
A recurring ticket, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and you have a full-time maintenance team, correct? And at this time, were they full-time?
I'm trying to remember the order of everything now. I think at this time, we had somebody who was working 30 hours a week, who was only working for us, but just didn't desire to work any more than 30 hours a week. So not necessarily full-time, but they were only working with us.
And then when you say like what constitutes an inconvenience versus an emergency, I imagine in your SOP, it said, okay, this is an inconvenience and this is how quickly we need to reply to an inconvenience. These are the steps.
Exactly. So there are levels for us. An emergency would be my basement is actively flooding, my stove is smoking and just caught the wall on fire. Those are emergencies. They need to be addressed right now. Call emergency services. Why are you even calling me? Like, emergencies. An inconvenience for us would be something like, my kitchen faucet is dripping. I put a bucket under it. And then that should be prioritized because obviously we don't want to have water damage, but it's not something that I'm going to call the maintenance guy Saturday night and get him to run out there to do. And then we have stuff that's a little bit less priority than that even, which is maybe the paint on my closet door is chipping. And we're like,
doors
okay, so we're going to
sticking.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, okay, I don't mean to get into the weeds, but I'm very interested because I need to implement this. So, how far do you troubleshoot? What does your SOP say for how long your manager and how hard they troubleshoot before it's okay, hand it over and spend whatever needs to be spent to get it done?
So we have steps written out for some of the different things that we will troubleshoot over the phone. So say there is an outlet in the kitchen that's not working, we're going to go through a few things, right? We're going to go check the breaker. We're going to see if maybe that's a daisy chain GFCI. And so that outlet might not look like it could be a tripped GFCI, but it might be linked to another outlet that is tripped. So we're going to, try to reset all of the GFCIs. We're going to check the breaker. We're going to check to make sure that all of the other power in the house is working out. If none of that is the issue, then we're going to send somebody out. And we have similar processes written out for things like the heat not working, the air conditioning not working, a light not working.
Yeah,
things
some
of
of
that
the
nature.
common things that are going to come up. I love that about the electrical outlet because that's actually something that I've experienced a few times. And like it was as simple as the breaker was tripped and we were able to troubleshoot over the phone. And your goal as a property manager should be to, for those things, not physically go to the property. It's okay for your tenants to figure some things out over the phone with you. Like you don't need to be at their beck and call for every little inconvenience like that.
And when you teach them how to do that, that means in the future they might figure it out without ever telling you. And I think that's something that me and Brant are really horrible at. We go out and I always say we need to do more troubleshooting, but then it's hard when you're when it might just be easier to just pop over there and do it than write out your troubleshooting sequence. So I think that probably just comes down to us carving out time in our day to spend an afternoon putting together a few sequences for future reference. How did that go for you?
I mean, that is so hard because we are physically close to our portfolio. So sometimes I think out of state investors almost have an advantage there because you are forced to be efficient with your time from the beginning. Whereas us being close to our portfolio, it's like, oh, I was going to be in that area later anyway. I'll just pop by. And it's like, that's fine now. But then when you go to hand that off, that's not a sustainable model to hand off to somebody, especially when you start paying people for their time or their, performance. And that visit to the property costs money. And now your maintenance budget is way overblown. It's just not efficient. So we had to pretend that we weren't local to our portfolio for a few weeks. I mean, really, that's what we did.
Pro tip, everybody. You should pretend like you're out of state, even if you're 5 minutes from your property.
Yeah. So we did that for a few months and then we physically left for a month. We booked an Airbnb for a month and we tested it out. Yeah. And we were like, okay, if we were really not here, we went down to Maryland for a month. We were still a little we didn't go to Mexico. We were like, if we need to drive back, Maryland's not that far. But we left and we stress tested the system and we saw, okay, what is working and what is actually really hard because we're not there. And how can we fix that so that in the future, it's not a problem?
I love that stress test. Very quick question. Does your driving time for your property manager, did that count as hours worked or was there any mileage reimbursement?
We don't pay him hourly, but we all try to work together to keep that to a minimum. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. What was the payment structure when you had your internal PM?
So we paid him a percentage of rents.
Okay.
And I think that's going to be different depending on where you live and the size of your portfolio and how automated your systems are and the experience level of the person and a whole bunch of different things. But we paid him a percentage of rents and then he also had a fee schedule for different activities. So a release, turnover, things like that, he would get a fee.
Was he full-time or how much time was he spending managing?
So I can't remember exactly how many units we had when he came on. I want to say it was around the low 30s. And I think the expected time allowance was about 20 hours a week.
Okay.
At that point.
Is it safe to say that you would have paid them a percentage less than a regular PM because you're paying for the softwares and you're doing the training and you're the one answering the big ticket questions at the end of the day?
Exactly. Yeah. We definitely paid less than you would pay an outside manager. And I think that's fair because they were plugging into all of our systems and processes that were already set
you
up.
built.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah.
Amelia, question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, for somebody that's looking to get started, like rewinding and thinking back to like when you were self-managing everything, like what are 2 tips that you could give like a new investor who is maybe scared to property manage?
Tips on property managing themselves, or tips on how to get yourself ready to hire somebody?
On property management that itself, because I feel like for the beginner investor, they're probably not going to hire out an in-house PM right away unless they're, I don't know, making a lot more money than I was when I first started, but
just killing it.
Yeah.
I mean, good for them, but we definitely didn't start there. Yeah. So I would say the first thing is do not be afraid to reach out to your investing community. There are so many groups, and I know I've been to our local group, I've been to other local groups in other cities. For the most part, the real estate investing community is just so welcoming and they want to help. Look at your group. It's amazing, the group that you guys have built. And they're all just so willing to help.
Yeah,
like we all want each other to succeed. Mm-hmm. So I know our local WIIRE, our local just like social investor get together groups, if you have a question and you go there, people will spend the time and they will talk to you. If they see that you're really taking action and you're really, putting what you've learned into action. Right? They won't maybe spend as much time with you if you're just reading the books and, haven't taken the steps yet. But if you're taking the steps, they're going to spend the time.
When you started in on this, I'm like sitting here shaking my head. Yes, like there's so much good information from those groups, but there's a way to present yourself that shows those people that you're serious. Like, like you're actually doing the thing. Because I've been to those meetups and there's people that, they're not doers. And I'm just kind of like, well, I don't want to spend that much time because I'm not trying to be mean, but like, I want to talk to the doers out there,
And you're not being mean. It's because we have all spent time with people like that in the past. And then it's frustrating because we want to see them succeed and it's hard to watch when they don't.
Yeah, that's
so
a good point.
It's not being selfish. It's just that we really are invested in the success of the people that we spend our time with.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's a great tip. Okay, so that's one tip. What would be your second tip for someone maybe wanting to property manage?
My second tip, and this is going to sound like super counterintuitive to the like rah like manifesting culture, okay? But this really helps me if I'm scared to take a step, is take something out to the worst case scenario. Okay, like what is the worst case scenario? Like if you did all of your homework, you took every precaution that you could, and you're taking, measured and responsible risks. What's the worst case scenario, right? Like you rent to a bad tenant. The absolute worst case scenario is that they might do some damage to my property, and I'm gonna have to do an eviction. Can I weather that? And if I can, then that's fine. I've covered my risk. I've done my due diligence, and it's fine. I'm gonna move forward. If I can't cover that risk, if that risk is not something that I'm willing to live with, then I'm going to change my strategy a little bit until I get to a spot where the worst case scenario is something that I have no problem living with.
I love that. And I'm a big believer of that as well. But I like what you said. There was a side note, worst case scenario based on proper due diligence and educated risk taking.
Exactly.
Not that you're just going over there and getting over your head on a deal that you know nothing about. Like,
right. We're not winging it. We're not taking it to that extreme. And we're also not saying, well, what if a plane crashes into my house? Right. Like we're thinking reasonable, and you've done your due diligence, and this is like what could reasonably happen.
I love that. And that has definitely helped me in the past.
I use that strategy all the time, and it's a way, and it's also such a good way to keep yourself from spiraling. Like, okay, I'm done spiraling. I'm done thinking of all these scenarios. I'm just going to think of the worst case scenario. And if I can handle that, then I'm going to move forward with that strategy. And that's that. I'm done worrying now. Like, that's it.
Thinking of the worst case scenario and writing it out is actually what I did to figure out if I was going to quit my W-2. And I literally wrote out all the worst cases, and I was like, oh shit, I can handle that.
That
I'm out.
Awesome.
I'm giving that 2 weeks.
I love to tell people that who are quitting, what's the worst case scenario? You would have to get a job again, right? That's like the worst case scenario. And that is most people's everyday life.
Right.
So if your worst case scenario is having to work every day, like, in a job again, that is so smart.
Kayla, I know that you don't still have this internal PM. If you've been listening well so far, you've probably picked up on the verbiage I've been using, because I know that you now have transitioned to a property management team. Tell us what that looked like and what the heck that means.
I think an in-house property manager is a really awesome option if you are having probably a similar portfolio size to what the three of us here have currently. It's an awesome option. I have a couple of extenuating circumstances in my life where I may have to move for a military assignment for a good chunk of the year. So I knew I needed to get myself into a position where we would not be dealing with turnover while we were gone, or that if there was a turnover, it would be somebody else's responsibility and not ours while we're gone, because we're going to be super limited in the amount of hours that we're able to work. So we kind of went into who, not how mode to figure out how we could solve this. And we partnered with somebody who had a lot of property management experience and had a similar but a little bit smaller size portfolio, who was very interested in starting a property management company, but didn't necessarily have the systems and processes and the business knowledge background to be able to do that initial lift and get that off the ground. So we partnered with the operating partner, and our in-house property manager now works with our property management company. So that was an awesome transition because we loved him. Yes. Mm-hmm. So now he just works under the property management company instead of working directly under us, which has been an awesome transition because, like I said, we loved him. When we came up with this idea, we were like, oh, but we really don't want to, have to part ways with the person we're working with now. So that was a great transition. We have a few more maintenance people now. Our operating partner focuses on the project management part of the business, and our in-house property manager that we were working with before focuses on the day-to-day management aspects of the business.
So for those who are listening, if you might have gotten a little confused, you essentially now hire a PM just like anybody else. It's just that you're the owner of this PM company along with another partner. So you have the quality control as well as the financial benefits of this PM, which is amazing. That is so cool.
Yeah. And that quality control part of it, I don't know if you saw my face light up when you said that.
Yeah.
But that is so important to us because, like you mentioned, we live in a tenant-friendly state. It's not very landlord-friendly. Having the quality control is so important to us. And that's the piece that I struggled with for the longest time when we were, thinking about how to minimize our management hours with our portfolio.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And let's just get to the brass tacks of it. Most property management companies are not quality. They aren't. So like being able to have your own is like amazing. Yeah. You can keep your properties in tip top condition with good tenants. Someone cares about that property that's managing it.
I just want to say for those listening, the reason why people will find a lot of PM teams are not quality is because they have to go for quantity, because they operate on such small margins. So they have to have 1 trillion properties to make good money, and then that means that your property doesn't get time and attention. So
and if your property is sitting vacant, they're not getting paid for that property that's sitting vacant, so therefore they're rushing to put tenants in that might not otherwise be up to your quality of tenant, etc. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, that incentive alignment is super important, and I think just the way that the property management business has developed and is structured for the most part results in some misaligned incentives, which are hard to work with for both parties.
So how much time do you spend right now between just management in general and then now basically your new business?
My only involvement at this point is 2 meetings per week. My husband has a little bit more involvement just because he's more of the systems guy. Appfolio is a pretty involved software. We were transitioning from a couple of other softwares that we were using. So he's a little bit more involved just with getting the bookkeeping up to snuff and making sure all of our ledgers are really accurate being transitioned over. But once that is finished, his involvement will also just be the 2 meetings per week. And that's a property management meeting and a project management meeting.
And then looking at the future of this property management team, are you taking on outside investors? Are you looking to grow that?
Yeah. So we did just take on our first 2 outside clients, and
woohoo!
Yeah, that was exciting.
Exciting.
I didn't really know about it until after it was done because our operating partner managed that process start to finish.
Yay. How many units did they bring on board with you?
I think it's a total of 10 between the 2 right now.
Sweet.
So where do you see this company going? Keep building, or is it more just for your in-house use with a little bit of extra work on the side?
We would like to keep building the company. We think that our management style is very successful here, and we think that other investors would like our management style and their portfolios would benefit from our management style. I know that we are lucky in Rochester that we do have a few really great property managers around that we're friends with. And so, we're not looking to take over the city, but we do have friends who have approached us for some different property management needs. So we would like to continue growing that part of the business.
Awesome. Well, any last questions, Grace?
I have one last question just to get into some more nitty-gritty things. Do you pay this PM like through 1099? Like, is it just like you would pay an outside from your internal portfolio?
Yeah, so that was an arrangement with our operating partner because we were both bringing our units under management of the management company. We both pay the property management company as if it was a totally separate, unrelated entity.
Right.
We definitely pay them a little bit less than you might be paying an outside manager, but we do, the property management company collects the rents now. We do everything like it's a completely unrelated company.
I love it. I think what you've built is so smart. And like you were saying about growing, property management is one of those things. If you have quality that speaks for itself, the business is going to come running to you. So that's really exciting.
Totally. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, if you're looking to find Kayla outside of this podcast, she is active on Instagram at That Landlady. And she's like one of the first people I ever started following in the real estate space. And she's just awesome. She provides a lot of free knowledge on there. So definitely check her out if you're not already following her.
Oh my gosh, you guys are too nice.
Thanks so much for being on our podcast today, Kayla. As always, definitely learned a ton from you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. This was fun.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you loved today's episode, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to check us out and join our community at womeninvestinrealestate.com and follow us on Instagram at WIIRE with 2 eyes.community.